It was supposed to be a simple drive. I was heading across the country, taking the less traveled roads to avoid the monotony of highways and to see parts of the country most people don't bother with. The kind of places where the fields stretch on forever, broken only by the occasional barn or a rusted pickup left to rot. My car, an older sedan that had served me well over the years, hummed along as I passed miles of nothingness. The sun was beginning to set, and the golden light gave everything a warm glow, a false sense of comfort, as I would soon learn. I had underestimated the distance between towns. The map app on my phone had assured me there was a small town up ahead, but as the fuel gauge edged closer to empty and the sky darkened, I started to doubt it. My phone signal had vanished an hour ago. I told myself it was fine, that I'd find a gas station soon, but the creeping unease in the back of my mind was hard to ignore. The road narrowed and twisted through low hills and patches of forest. I hadn't seen another car in what felt like hours. Every now and then, I'd pass a dilapidated farmhouse or a mailbox leaning at a precarious angle, but there were no lights, no signs of life, just an endless stretch of road and the sound of my tires crunching against the asphalt. When the car sputtered and slowed, I wasn't entirely surprised. I pulled over to the shoulder, though shoulder is generous. It was more like the edge of the road dropped into a ditch. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty road ahead. The engine was silent, and the only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. Okay, I muttered to myself. No big deal. I popped the hood. Though I knew it wasn't the engine, I was out of gas. Still, the act of checking felt productive, like I was doing something useful. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment, its beam cutting through the growing darkness. The air was cooler now, and I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around me. The nearest town couldn't be that far, I thought. I just have to walk. I locked the car and started down the road, my flashlight bobbing with each step. The trees on either side of the road were thick, their branches arching overhead to form a tunnel of shadows. Every now and then, I'd hear the scurry of an animal in the underbrush or the distant hoot of an owl. Normal sounds, but in the silence, they seemed amplified, almost menacing. After what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light in the distance. Relief washed over me, and I quickened my pace. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't a town or even a house, just a single, flickering bulb hanging above a gas pump. The station was old, the kind of place that might have been bustling 50 years ago, but now looked like it hadn't seen customers in decades. The windows of the small building were grimy, and the paint was peeling off the walls. But there was gas, and that was all I cared about. The pump was manual, with a rusted handle you had to crank. I walked up to the building, hoping to find someone inside, but the door was locked. Peering through the glass, I could see shelves covered in dust and a counter with an old cash register. It didn't look like anyone had been here in years. I knocked on the door, then pounded on it, but there was no response. Frustrated, I turned back to the pump. There was a small metal box attached to it, probably for payments. I opened it and found a stack of old envelopes and a handwritten note. "Pay what you can." Pulled out my wallet and stuffed a few bills into the box. Cranking the handle, I managed to get the pump going. It was slow, and I had to work for every drop, but eventually, I filled up a gas can I found lying nearby. It wasn't much, but it would get me to the next town. Just as I was about to leave, I heard it. A faint sound coming from the trees. A low, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps. I froze, straining to listen. It stopped, telling myself it was probably an animal. I shook it off and started back toward my car. The sound returned, closer this time. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath, smacking it until the beam steadied. I quickened my pace, the gas can bumping against my leg. The footsteps followed, matching my speed. I didn't dare look back. My heart was pounding, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to keep walking, each step deliberate. Running would only make it worse, I told myself. Whoever or whatever was back there would see it as a chase. Finally, I saw my car in the distance, a dark shape against the faint glow of the horizon. Relief surged through me, and I broke into a jog. As I reached the car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. The footsteps had stopped, but I didn't dare look around. I poured the gas into the tank, sloshing some onto the ground in my haste. The smell of gasoline was sharp in the cool night air. I jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered to life, and I floored it, the tires kicking up gravel as I sped down the road. My heart was racing, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone, or something, chasing after me. But the road was empty. It wasn't until I was miles away that I finally let myself relax. The next town was small but had a brightly lit gas station and a diner. I pulled in, filled up the tank, and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the neon signs buzzing in the darkness. Whatever had happened back there, I told myself it was over now, just a fluke, a weird coincidence. But as I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watched, that whoever had been in the trees hadn't just been following me. They'd been waiting for me. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, just paranoia from being alone in the middle of nowhere. But deep down, I knew better. Some places aren't meant to be traveled alone. The road stretched out before me like a black ribbon, cutting through the barren landscape. The sun had set hours ago, and now the world was lit only by the pale glow of my car's headlights. I had been driving for hours, the GPS showing no signs of civilization for miles. This was the middle of nowhere, no streetlights, no gas stations, not even a house. Just miles of cracked asphalt and endless desert scrub on either side. It wasn't my first choice to take this route, but a last-minute detour had thrown me off course. Construction or an accident, I couldn't remember which, had forced me to leave the main highway, and the GPS directed me onto this desolate back road. It had seemed fine at first, but now the loneliness of the road was sinking in. I hadn't passed another car in what felt like forever. The fuel gauge caught my eye, just under a quarter tank. Not great. I told myself there'd be a gas station eventually. There had to be, right? But as the minutes ticked by, that optimism began to fade. My phone had no signal either, not surprising out here, but it still added to my unease. The static hum of the car radio wasn't much help. Every station was either pure static or faint music that cut out every few seconds. I started to notice the little things. The way the wind howled outside the car, sounding almost human. The occasional flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, probably just a bird or something scurrying across the road, but enough to make my heart skip a beat. The roadkill too, too much of it. Raccoons, deer, even a coyote, felt unnatural. Then the car made a sound, a sort of sputter. My heart leaped into my throat. No, 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 I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The engine was still running, but the car felt sluggish, like it was struggling to keep going. The gas light blinked on. Great. I slowed down to conserve fuel, even though a part of me wanted to floor it and get out of this place as fast as possible. My brain started doing the math. How far could I go on fumes? 5 miles? 10? And what if I didn't find anything by then? Another sputter. This time, the engine cut out completely. The car coasted for a few agonizing seconds before coming to a stop. I sat there, gripping the wheel, the silence pressing in on me. I tried turning the key, but the engine wouldn't catch. Just a sad whirring noise. The gas gauge was dead empty. Damn it, I muttered, slamming my hand against the wheel. I sat there for a minute, weighing my options. I could stay in the car and wait for another vehicle to pass. But who knew how long that would take? Hours? Days? Walking seemed like the only choice. The GPS showed a town about 12 miles ahead. Not ideal, but better than sitting here doing nothing. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, along with a bottle of water and my jacket. The air outside was colder than I'd expected, with a sharp wind that cut right through my clothes. The desert had a way of tricking you like that, blazing hot during the day, freezing at night. I locked the car out of habit, even though I doubted anyone would come across it, and started walking. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but it didn't reach far. Just a narrow cone of light in an ocean of black. The road seemed even more endless on foot, stretching on and on with no end in sight. Every few steps, I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see. What? A car? Person? Something worse? I didn't know. But the feeling of being watched was impossible to shake. The first hour passed slowly. I kept my pace steady, sipping water when my throat got dry and trying to ignore the ache in my legs. I told myself to stay calm, to keep moving. But the little noises got to me. The crunch of gravel under my boots, the rustle of bushes in the wind, the occasional snap of a twig somewhere off in the darkness. I told myself it was just animals. Coyotes, maybe, but my mind kept conjuring up worse possibilities. At one point, I thought I saw headlights in the distance. My heart leaped, and I waved the flashlight frantically, hoping to flag them down. But as I stood there, staring, the lights didn't move. They just hovered there on the horizon, flickering slightly. Then they disappeared. Just a mirage, I told myself. A trick of the eyes. But it left me feeling more alone than ever. The night wore on, the cold biting deeper with every step. My feet were sore, my throat dry despite the water. I checked the GPS again. 8 miles to go. That didn't seem right. Hadn't I walked more than that? Felt like I'd been walking forever. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion. That's when I saw it, a building in the distance. Just a dark shape against the horizon at first, but as I got closer, it came into focus. A gas station. It looked old and run down, the kind of place you'd normally avoid if you had any choice. But right now, it was a beacon of hope. The lights inside were on, flickering slightly, but enough to make me think someone might be there. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding with relief. The gas pumps were ancient, the kind with the spinning numbers instead of digital screens. A rusted-out pickup truck sat parked to the side, covered in dust. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling weakly. The air inside was stale, smelling of old grease and mildew. Shelves lined with dusty snacks and faded magazines filled the small space. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing slightly. No answer. I stepped further inside, the floor creaking under my weight. Behind the counter was a door marked "Employees Only," slightly ajar. I hesitated, then knocked lightly. "Anyone here?" No response. I pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, cluttered with boxes and an old desk, but it was empty. No sign of anyone. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The place was abandoned, wasn't it? But why were the lights still on? And the truck outside, it had to belong to someone. I went back to the main area, scanning the shelves for anything useful. Most of the food was expired, but I grabbed a bag of chips and a bottle of soda that didn't look too old. I was about to leave when I heard it. A faint noise coming from outside, a sort of scraping sound. My blood ran cold. I turned off the flashlight and crouched down, peeking out the window. The truck was still there, but now there was movement near it. A shadowy figure hunched over, doing something I couldn't make out. I stayed frozen, watching. The figure straightened up, and I could see it more clearly now. A man wearing a dirty jacket and a baseball cap. He was holding something, a crowbar, maybe? He looked around, then started walking toward the gas station. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I backed away from the window, trying to stay quiet. The door jingled as he pushed it open. Heavy boots thudded against the floor. "Hello?" he called out, his voice rough. I didn't answer. I crouched behind one of the shelves, trying to steady my breathing. He walked further in, the floor creaking under his weight. "Saw your car back there," he said, his voice closer now. "Ran out of gas, huh?" I stayed silent, my mind racing. Did he mean me harm? Or was he just another traveler stuck out here? I didn't want to find out. Slowly, I started moving toward the back door, keeping low. Then I heard the click, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Come on out," he said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. My eyes darted around, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. A glass bottle on the shelf caught my eye. Slowly, I reached for it, my fingers trembling. "I know you're here," he said, his voice sharper now. "Saw your flashlight earlier. Just come out and we'll talk." I didn't believe him for a second. My fingers closed around the bottle, and I held it tightly, waiting. His footsteps grew louder, closer. Then he rounded the corner, his eyes locking onto mine. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then I swung the bottle as hard as I could. It shattered against his head, and he stumbled back with a grunt of pain. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. I bolted for the back door, throwing it open and sprinting into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, my legs screaming in protest. Behind me, I could hear him shouting, his boots pounding against the ground. I didn't look back. My only thought was to get away. The desert stretched out before me, endless and unforgiving. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. Eventually, the shouts faded, and the only sound was my own ragged breathing. I kept moving, too afraid to stop, until the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. When I finally reached the town, I was half delirious with exhaustion. A kind stranger found me on the edge of the road and took me to the police. They found my car and the gas station, but the man was gone. The truck was gone too, as if he'd vanished into thin air. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. Even now, I can't shake the feeling of being watched. The memory of his shadowy figure burned into my mind. The middle of nowhere isn't empty. It never is. I can help you write a story, but creating 7,000 words in a single response is a bit too much for me at once. Instead, I can write it in parts to ensure it's as detailed as possible while maintaining readability. I'll start the first part of the story now and continue from there. It was supposed to be a simple drive, just me, my car, and the open road. I'd had a rough week at work, and all I needed was some time to clear my head. The plan was to drive out of town, maybe find a secluded spot by the lake, take a few hours to myself, then head back and pretend like I hadn't just spent the past 3 days glued to my desk. I didn't really know where I was going when I first set out, just that it was far enough from the city to feel like a break. The road was a stretch of empty highway, with little more than the occasional farm or dilapidated signpost marking my journey. First, it was peaceful. The hum of the tires against the asphalt, the occasional rustle of the wind, and the endless stretch of grass and trees on either side of the road. For a while, I lost myself in the monotony of it all. But somewhere along the way, I took a wrong turn. It wasn't obvious at first. The GPS said I was still on track. I passed a few crossroads, all of them looking more desolate than the last. Then I saw a faded green sign that I barely caught in my peripheral vision. It was so worn that I couldn't make out what it said, but it had a picture of a mountain and a tiny arrow pointing left. I figured it was just another road to a camping site or something. I didn't think twice about it. The road narrowed, becoming little more than a dirt trail that wound its way through thick trees. The trees were dense, their branches reaching out like long, crooked fingers that seemed to close in around me. The deeper I drove, the quieter everything became. The usual hum of the tires was swallowed by the thick woods. I tried to turn the radio on, but the signal was shot. The only sound now was the crunching of dirt beneath my car and the occasional bird call far off in the distance. I began to feel an unsettling sensation. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like a nagging awareness that something wasn't right. But I shrugged it off. I told myself I was just overthinking. I'd been cooped up in an office all week. Maybe I was just a little stir-crazy. After what felt like hours, I came across a clearing. A small shack stood in the middle of it, surrounded by a dilapidated fence. The paint on the shack was peeling, and the wood had rotted in places. There was no one around, no sign of life, just the house and the emptiness. At first, I thought about turning around, but I was already so far off track that it seemed pointless. Plus, the thought of finally seeing a sign of life, even if it was just an old shack, was oddly comforting. So I pulled up to the shack and parked a few feet away, figuring I'd stretch my legs and take a look around. The place was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if you've missed something. No birds, no insects, just the sound of the wind in the trees. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next, when I noticed something strange. A small figure stood in the window of the shack, watching me. It wasn't a person, not really. It was too small, its outline barely visible through the grime-covered glass. I thought maybe it was a child, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively took a step back. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I considered getting back in the car and leaving, but some quiet, inexplicable curiosity, kept me rooted to the spot. I slowly approached the door, my footsteps making no sound on the dirt. The figure in the window never moved. I reached the door and gently tried the handle. It was unlocked. For a moment, I hesitated. What was I even doing? This place felt wrong, too wrong, like I was crossing some invisible line. But that feeling of curiosity, of needing to know, kept me from turning back. I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked loudly, and the smell of mildew and damp would hit me immediately. Inside, the shack was dark, despite the daylight filtering in through the cracked windows. It looked as though no one had lived here for years. There were old, broken chairs scattered around, overturned tables and piles of trash. It was a mess, but there was something about it that made me feel uneasy, like I was intruding on something that had been forgotten. Then I saw the floorboards. They weren't just old and creaky. They were covered in strange markings, some of them scrawled in what looked like dirt, others carved into the wood. It wasn't a language I recognized, just patterns and lines, some of them overlapping, as if someone had been trying to communicate something. My stomach twisted. I moved deeper into the shack, drawn by a force I couldn't understand. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating, and I found myself walking toward the back of the room without even thinking about it. That's when I saw the trapdoor. It was hidden beneath a thick layer of dust, but there was no mistaking it. A small, wooden hatch in the floor, the edges worn down from years of neglect. My first thought was to leave, to walk out the way I came and never look back. But then I remembered the figure in the window, the strange, unmoving figure that had been watching me. The curiosity was unbearable now. I knelt down, brushed away the dust, and tugged at the handle. The trapdoor opened with a low, groaning sound, revealing a dark stairwell leading down into the earth. I could barely make out the steps, but the faint smell of something rotten reached my nose. Something old, something decayed. I told myself it was just a storage space, maybe a root cellar or something of the sort, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. No root cellar needed to be hidden like this. I stepped down onto the first step, and that's when the noises started. At first, it was a low rumble, like the sound of something shifting beneath the floorboards. Then, it became more distinct, almost like a whispering, a low murmur that I couldn't quite make out. I froze, heart pounding. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing on end, and my breath was coming faster now, short gasps as I stood there, listening. The whispering grew louder. It was coming from below. Whatever it wasn't just my imagination. I could hear it, feel it in my bones. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I should have turned back right then. But again, I couldn't help myself. Something pulled me forward, deeper into the dark. I made my way down the stairs, slowly, quietly, until my feet touched the cold earth below. The room was small, barely big enough to fit a person. And in the center of it all, there was a large stone well. The stones were cracked and moss-covered, the opening covered by an old, rusted grate. I could see something moving in the darkness beyond, though I couldn't tell what. Something alive, something that was waiting. I didn't want to know what it was. I turned and ran. I don't know how, but I managed to make it back up the stairs, out of the shack, and into my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, and I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I kept expecting to hear something following me, something watching me, but there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of the tires on the road, the familiar surroundings of the city, and the feeling of relief flooding my chest as I pulled into my driveway. I never told anyone about what happened that day, about the shack, the trapdoor, or the whispering, and I never went back. But sometimes, when I lie awake at night, I hear a faint murmur, a whispering, so quiet I can't make out the words, but I know it's there. It's the same whisper I heard from below, and I'm terrified to know what it's trying to tell me. The road was empty. The only sound was the hum of my car's engine, my tires spinning on the cracked, gravel highway that stretched for miles with no sign of life. I had been driving for hours, the sunset now long behind me, and the night was settling in with a heaviness that seemed to come from the land itself. My phone had no signal, the GPS screen flickered, and I had no idea when I would hit the next town. The headlights were my only guide, cutting through the darkness like a blade through fog. I had made a mistake, a stupid mistake. I shouldn't have taken this route, but it was the fastest. I had been in a rush, chasing a deadline, heading to a friend's place for the weekend. The map had shown a shortcut that would save me an hour, and it seemed like the perfect plan at the time. But now, with the road empty, no cars in sight, and not a house or streetlight in sight for miles, I realized I should have stuck to the main highway. The road twisted and turned, snaking through trees that crowded close, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers trying to touch the car. A dense forest lay on both sides, making me feel like I was trapped in a tunnel. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me. The deeper I went into the woods, the more I felt like something was watching me, though every time I turned to look, there was nothing there. My headlights caught something up ahead, a shape in the road. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. A figure stood in the middle of the road, just standing there, unmoving like a statue. I couldn't see any details, but I could tell it was a person. I sat there for a second, unsure of what to do. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood perfectly still. I thought about honking, but the idea seemed foolish. I could just wait it out, right? Maybe they were just lost or had broken down, but it felt strange. Too strange. I shifted into park, my hands shaking, and rolled down the window slightly. A cold draft hit me immediately, as if the air outside was different, thick and heavy. But the figure didn't budge. My breath caught in my throat. What should I do? I couldn't just sit here forever. Slowly, I began to ease the car forward. The figure didn't move. I thought about swerving around, but there was no room. I was stuck. The closer I got, the clearer the outline of the person became. A man. He was tall, though I couldn't make out his features in the dim light. His clothes were dirty, torn in places, and his posture was stiff, like he wasn't even alive. I felt my stomach drop, an icy feeling settling over me. Finally, I stopped, just a few feet away. He didn't move. I honked the horn, just a short, sharp blast. Nothing. My heart pounded louder now, a steady thump in my chest. Was this some kind of trap? I had heard stories, seen things on the news. A trick. People getting stranded on these roads only to find themselves in worse situations. I turned off the engine. The silence was deafening. The headlights illuminated the man in front of me, but I still couldn't make out his face. His hair was long and matted, his clothes filthy. He looked out of place. No sign of a vehicle, no indication of why he was standing here. "Are you okay?" I called out the window, my voice shaking despite myself. No answer. I tried again, louder this time, but nothing. No movement, no response. I put the car back in gear, ready to leave. I had to get out of here. The longer I stayed, the more I felt like something was going to go horribly wrong. But just before I could drive away, the figure moved. Slowly, impossibly slow, like a mannequin brought to life. He didn't walk, he just slid forward, his feet dragging as though he didn't have the strength to lift them. I froze, my foot hovering over the gas pedal. What was happening? Why wasn't he responding? Was he even real? I didn't know what to think. The figure continued moving towards the car. The closer he got, the more I could see. His face, pale and gaunt, with dark eyes that seemed to stare right through me. His skin had a strange, sickly hue, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. A cold sweat ran down my back, and I slammed the car into reverse. Couldn't breathe. This wasn't right. This wasn't real. I stepped on the gas, desperate to get away. The gravel under my tires screeched as I sped backward, my eyes fixed on the figure. I could feel my heart racing, my body trembling. I didn't dare look away. Just before I reached a turn, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was standing in the middle of the road, his eyes locked on me, his face expressionless. I didn't know what I had just seen or why it didn't make sense. What was he doing out here? Why was he still standing there, staring at me like he had all the time in the world? I pushed the pedal down harder, the car jerking forward as I made a sharp turn onto a narrow side road. The trees closed in on either side, and the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I had no choice but to keep going. My mind raced with confusion, trying to make sense of everything, but nothing fit. Hours seemed to pass before I saw the first signs of civilization. A cluster of houses appeared in the distance. I felt a strange relief, as if I was escaping some nightmare, but there was no denying what had happened. Something was out there, something I couldn't explain. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, parking quickly and getting out of the car. My hands were still shaking, my knees weak beneath me. I needed a drink, something to calm my nerves. I walked into the station, the bell above the door jingling. The attendant looked up from his phone and gave me a nod. "Long drive?" he asked casually, though his eyes narrowed as he saw the state I was in. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't respond. I just grabbed a bottle of water and walked to the counter. "You headin' north?" he asked, as if it was any other conversation. "Yeah," I replied, my voice still shaky. "The road back there. There's something wrong with it." The attendant chuckled. "That road's always been weird. Lots of folks get lost, but nothing out of the ordinary. You get used to it." I swallowed hard. "You mean people just walk out in the middle of the road like that?" He raised an eyebrow. "Not that I've heard of. There's a lot of strange things out here. You ever seen the woods after dark? You'd be surprised what people say happens. I didn't know what to say. I paid for the water and left without another word. The road was long behind me, but the feeling didn't fade. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. Every now and then, I would glance into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure from the road still following me. But there was nothing, just the road stretching ahead, empty and dark. Eventually, I arrived at my friend's place. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not then, not ever. I don't think anyone would have believed me, but I know what I saw. I know that something wasn't right on that road. It wasn't the forest. It wasn't the town. It wasn't even the man. It was the feeling, the deep, unsettling knowledge that something in that place had been waiting for me, waiting to see how far I would go before I turned back. It had been a long drive, a drive that, by all accounts, shouldn't have been taking as long as it did. Yet there I was, miles away from anywhere, surrounded by nothing but endless stretches of open road. No towns, no houses, not even power lines. Just the occasional break in the endless sea of trees or an empty stretch of farmland that seemed to go on forever. I'd never felt so alone in my life. I had been on a work trip, just a short visit to a remote research facility out in the country. The kind of place where no one really wants to go, but someone has to. My GPS had taken me off the main highways, directing me through winding back roads. I had gotten used to driving these less traveled paths, but the further I went, the more isolated the scenery became. The trees loomed tall and dark, casting long shadows across the road. The overcast sky, dark and brooding, only added to the feeling of isolation. At first, I thought it was just the nerves from being on the road for so long. But soon, even the chirping of the birds faded away. It was strange, this sudden stillness in the air. There was no wind, no sound, not even the faintest rustling of leaves. Just this dead silence. My car's engine hummed steadily, and I kept my focus on the road ahead, watching for signs, hoping to see something that told me I was close to where I was supposed to be. My mind started to wander. I began wondering if this was the kind of place people disappeared to. You know, those out-of-the-way locations that seemed to stretch on endlessly. There was something eerie about being so far from civilization. It wasn't until I passed a dilapidated farmhouse, long abandoned, that I started to feel uncomfortable. The house was barely standing, windows shattered, roof caving in. A rusted-out car sat in the yard, looking like it had been there for decades. The weeds had grown so high around it that the car was almost unrecognizable. As I passed by, my eyes lingered on the property, a strange unease crawling over my skin. It was the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about if you were in a city, but here it felt different. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I tried to shake off the feeling and focused on my destination. I had to make it to that research facility no matter what. But as the minutes turned into hours, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was heading deeper into nothingness. No houses, no signs of life, not even a gas station. My fuel gauge was starting to dip dangerously low. Then the car sputtered. It was only for a second, but it was enough to make my heart race. I pressed the gas pedal harder, hoping it was just a hiccup, but the engine sputtered again, this time longer. I pulled over to the side of the road, the tires crunching on the gravel. My palms were sweaty as I shifted the car into park and turned off the engine. The silence outside felt so much louder now. The car sat there, silent and still, in the middle of nowhere. I tried starting it again, but it wouldn't turn over. Great, I was stranded. I checked my phone, but of course, there was no service. No surprise there. I'd been warned that the area was spotty at best. I grabbed my emergency kit, hoping to find something to help me get back on the road. I had jumper cables, a flashlight, some water, and basic tools, but nothing that would fix a broken engine. It wasn't like I could call a tow truck out here. I didn't even know where I was. As the sun began to set, I realized that I was going to have to spend the night in the car. The thought of walking to find help was just as terrifying as staying in the car. The woods seemed so thick, and the road stretched on without end. It was easy to feel lost here, and I was already starting to feel the weight of the darkness pressing in around me. I locked the doors and tried to get some rest, but every little noise outside made my heart race. There were no other cars passing by, no sounds of animals, just the rustle of wind and the occasional snap of a twig. The darkness outside seemed to swallow up the light from the car's headlights. As the hours passed, I grew more and more restless. I tried to distract myself by playing on my phone, but the battery was quickly draining. The last thing I wanted was to be without any kind of power. I kept telling myself that I'd be fine. Tomorrow I'd start walking, or maybe someone would drive by. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't a place where people came. This wasn't a place where you were likely to get help. By the time midnight rolled around, I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stay in the car. I had to do something. I grabbed my flashlight, locked the doors, and stepped out into the cold air. The night was thick with fog, swirling around my feet as I made my way down the road. The flashlight beam cut through the haze, revealing nothing but an endless stretch of trees and darkness. I tried to focus on the road ahead, telling myself that I just needed to keep walking, but every step felt like it took me further away from everything familiar. The woods on either side were dense, and the road was starting to feel like it was closing in on me. My heart pounded in my chest as the silence pressed in, suffocating and overwhelming. The fog felt like it was pressing against my skin, and the deeper I walked, the more I felt like I was being pulled into something. But what? I kept walking, hoping that just around the next bend, I'd find something. A sign, a house, a person. But the road just kept winding, the trees growing thicker, the darkness more oppressive. It was then that I saw it, a flicker of light. I stopped dead in my tracks, squinting into the darkness. At first, I thought it might have been my mind playing tricks on me, but the light was real. It was soft at first, then brighter, as though it was coming closer. My breath hitched in my throat as I moved cautiously toward it, the beam of my flashlight bouncing across the trees. As I got closer, I saw it, an old cabin. It was small, weather-beaten, but there was a light inside. A warm glow flickered through the cracks in the wooden slats. I wasn't sure what to think. Who would be out here in the middle of nowhere? But it was the only sign of life I'd seen for hours. I moved closer, trying to keep my footsteps as quiet as possible, even though the wet ground seemed to slosh beneath my boots. I reached the cabin door, the wood creaking as I gently pushed it open. I stepped inside, the warmth of the place wrapping around me like a blanket. It smelled like old wood and something faintly sweet, like a wood-burning stove. The light came from a small fire in the corner, burning low but steady. But there was no one there. I checked every corner, every shadow, but the cabin was empty. Nothing looked out of place, except for the faint marks on the floor, scratches, as though something heavy had been dragged across the room. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight as I moved toward the back of the cabin, where a small door led to a cellar. I had no intention of going down there, not without a good reason. The cabin seemed safe enough for now. I could rest for a while and maybe figure out what to do next. Just as I was about to sit by the fire, I heard it, a thud, coming from outside. I froze, my blood running cold. My flashlight flickered in my hand. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was wrong. Something was out there, and it was closer than I wanted it to be. The cabin's door creaked in the wind as I stood there, listening. Then the sound came again, closer, a slow, deliberate thud. I quickly ran to the window and peeked through a crack in the old curtains. There was nothing, Just the dark, empty road. No one in sight. I slammed the curtain shut and backed away from the window. The fire crackled behind me, but the warmth felt distant now. The air was thick with the tension of something lurking outside, just waiting for the right moment to make itself known. The thought of staying in the cabin alone was unbearable. But what choice did I have? I turned to the door, preparing to leave. If I couldn't get the car started, then I'd have to find my way out on foot. I wasn't sure where to go, but I couldn't stay here any longer. But just as my hand reached for the door handle, the cabin door slammed shut on its own. A deep breath escaped me as panic gripped my chest. This was it. Something was wrong. Something was hunting me. I grabbed my flashlight, my only hope now, and shone it across the room, but it was too late. The door creaked open again, and this time, I wasn't alone. I don't remember exactly when it started feeling wrong, but I know it wasn't too long after I left the city. I was tired of the noise, the constant rush, and the feeling that I was always being pulled in too many directions. I just wanted space, something real, something quiet. I figured the best way to escape was to drive until I couldn't hear the world anymore. So I did. I packed my things, threw them into my car, and set out. The roads were empty, mostly. A few towns scattered here and there, but nothing that would make me feel like I was still part of something bigger. At first, I thought that was a relief, but as the miles stretched on, I started feeling an odd weight in my chest. It wasn't loneliness exactly, more like a sense of isolation that deepened the more I drove. But that was fine. I had to push through it. I needed to find a place to stay for the night, and the map on my phone didn't show much. There wasn't much in the way of options. The sun began setting as I crossed into what looked like an even more desolate stretch of land. There were some scattered trees, a few dilapidated barns here and there, but nothing resembling a town. No gas stations, no signs of life, just open fields and dirt roads. I kept going. My car hummed along, the only sound filling the silence. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world had felt so distant even before I lost service on my phone. I should have turned back, but I convinced myself that I was fine. People did this all the time, right? They went off the grid, away from civilization. It would be an adventure. That's what I told myself. It wasn't long before I found a spot that seemed to be as good as any. A small, secluded patch of land off the road with a few trees for cover. I parked my car just off the dirt path, the grass brushing up against the sides. The air was thick with the smell of earth and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the dampness in the air or just the feeling of being so far from anything familiar. Either way, I was tired, and I needed to sleep. I grabbed my things and set up in the back of the car, using my jacket as a pillow. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't a feeling of someone standing over me or a presence in the shadows. It was more subtle than that, like something just outside the edge of my awareness. At first, I thought it was just the noise of the wind, the rustling of leaves, or maybe even the sounds of animals in the distance. But then there was a sudden quiet that made the air feel thick, almost pressing down on me. My eyes darted to the windows, but I saw nothing. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. It stayed with me the whole night, lingering in the back of my mind, gnawing at me like a quiet worry. When I woke up, it was still early, the light barely creeping over the horizon. I was stiff from the awkward position I'd slept in, but the feeling of being watched was gone, at least for the moment. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and stretched my legs. The air was still heavy, but the sun was just starting to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the land. I knew I should probably get moving, but there was something in me that wanted to stay, wanted to explore this place a bit more. The area was quiet, serene even, but that was the thing. It was too quiet. There wasn't even a chirp of birds or a rustle of small animals. everything felt still, like everything was holding its breath. I had no idea why, but I just felt compelled to stay a little longer. I grabbed my water bottle and started walking away from the car, heading into the trees. The path was faint, overgrown in some areas, but it was still clear enough to follow. I took a few more steps, the ground beneath me soft with moss and fallen leaves. The trees arched over me like they were closing in, the air growing cooler as I ventured deeper. Something was off, though. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was as if the world was growing tighter around me, pressing in. It wasn't just the lack of wildlife either. It was the feeling that the woods themselves were waiting for something, maybe even watching. I kept walking, the sensation growing stronger with every step. Eventually, the trees gave way to a small clearing. There, at the center, was an old, rusted car. It was half buried in the underbrush, barely visible if you weren't looking for it. The paint was peeling, the windows cracked, the tires deflated. Yet, it wasn't the car that caught my attention. It was the strange, unsettling feeling that hit me when I saw it. Like something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. There was no sign of a road leading to this place, no trail that would make sense of how the car had ended up here. I circled it, inspecting every detail. The car was abandoned, clearly. There was no sign of life around it. Yet, it didn't feel abandoned. Felt watched. I turned around, my heart racing now for no reason I could understand, and began heading back to the car. The moment I looked over my shoulder, I felt it. A sharp sense that I wasn't alone. The air had changed, or maybe it was just me. Something felt off, quickened my pace. The sense of being followed, no, watched, came back stronger now, like eyes were on me from somewhere in the trees. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I had to get out of there. It was supposed to be a short drive, just a quick, straightforward trip out of the city and back again before dark. I've been running on little sleep, but I figured the drive would help clear my mind. I was in no rush, just a little over an hour between me and the quiet, suburban town I used to visit when I was younger. I didn't expect anything unusual to happen. The road seemed to stretch on forever, the landscape outside the car window a blur of fields and trees as I pushed the pedal down. I didn't even think twice when the radio stations started cutting in and out. There was something soothing about the static, almost like it was the last bit of company I had before the quiet took over. I passed the sign for the town, and for a split second, I felt like I was back in time. Everything looked the same. The same gas stations, the same old diner where I'd eaten pancakes with my parents when I was little. I almost smiled, the nostalgia pulling at something deep in me, but it quickly faded as I continued down the winding road. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, I realized just how far I had gone out of my way. The town I'd planned on reaching was a mere 10 miles away, but somehow I had driven almost twice that. The signs on the side of the road were sparse now. Not that it mattered much. The car's GPS didn't show anything out here anyway. The only thing visible in every direction were trees, tall and thick, casting long shadows over the worn-out asphalt. It was like I had stepped into a forgotten corner of the world, a place that hadn't been touched in years. I slowed down as I came to a sharp curve in the road. The sky had darkened, and I could feel the temperature dropping. I switched on the headlights and pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders. Something about the silence out here felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the empty space around me seemed to echo, as if I were the only living thing for miles. It wasn't long before I noticed a small building off the side of the road. It looked old, abandoned even, with boards nailed over the windows. The kind of place that didn't belong anywhere anymore. But as I passed it, I saw something strange, a light flickering inside. For a moment, I wondered if it was some sort of trick, maybe the reflection of my headlights. But no, the light was real, and it was coming from a window at the back of the building. I should have kept driving. But curiosity got the best of me, as it often does. I pulled into the dirt driveway, the crunching of gravel beneath my tires the only sound as I parked in front of the dilapidated structure. The light was still on, and I couldn't help but wonder who else would be out here in the middle of nowhere. I glanced at the building's faded sign, but the words were barely legible. It looked like it had once been some sort of store, but now it was just a shell. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. I stared at it for a moment, unsure if I should go in or not. My gut told me to turn around, but the part of me that was still a little too curious pushed me forward. Stepping out of the car, I felt the cold air hit my face. There was no sound, not a bird, not a breeze, just a heavy, thick silence pressing down on me. I took a few steps toward the door, and as I did, I noticed something strange about the ground. There were tracks, faint but visible in the dirt. They didn't look like car tracks, they were too small, almost like someone had been walking in and out of the building. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling settling in my stomach, but it was hard to ignore. I reached out and pushed the door open slowly. It creaked as it swung wider, and I stepped inside. The air smelled old, dust, must, and something else, something sharp like burnt wood. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I could just make out the outline of old furniture, broken tables, and shelves lined with boxes that had long since lost their labels. But what caught my attention wasn't the mess. It was the sound. A low, rhythmic thumping noise, like something tapping on wood. It was coming from somewhere deeper inside the building. I froze. My heart started pounding. It was probably just an animal, right? A raccoon or something stuck in the walls. But even as I told myself that, the noise grew louder, closer. I took a slow step back, but my foot hit something solid, and I turned quickly, catching a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. It was a figure, small, hunched over, and moving toward me in the shadows. I didn't wait. I bolted, out of the door, back to the car. My hands fumbled with the door handle, and I could feel my pulse roaring in my ears. I slammed the door shut and threw the car into reverse, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me. I drove away fast, heart racing, my breath shallow. The road seemed endless, the trees never stopping on either side of me. It was like I was trapped in a tunnel of darkness, speeding toward who knows what. But after a while, I noticed something. The static on the radio had returned, and with it, a soft whisper, almost imperceptible at first. I tried to tune it out, but it only grew louder, clearer. It was as if the words were just within reach, but I couldn't quite understand them. I pulled over again, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But when I looked at my phone, I saw that there was no signal. The battery was at 40%, and I had no way of calling for help. I sat in the silence for a long moment, trying to steady my breath. The whispering hadn't stopped. In fact, it seemed to be right there next to me. And then I heard it, someone knocking on the window. My heart nearly stopped. I turned slowly, expecting to see someone, anyone, standing there. But there was nothing. No one. The road was empty, the trees swaying slightly in the breeze, nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't stick around to figure it out. I put the car in drive and floored it, speeding down the road, not caring if I passed that old building again. I just wanted to be anywhere but here, anywhere but this lonely stretch of nothing. After a long while, I reached a small town. I didn't care what town it was, but I knew I was finally out of that void. I parked at the first gas station I could find and sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm my nerves. My hands were shaking. It wasn't just the fear. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air rushing to meet me. I needed a moment to breathe, to ground myself. The place was quiet, and the gas station attendant was nowhere to be found. I didn't care. I just walked across the street to the small diner, hoping for a hot cup of coffee, something familiar. When I walked in, I saw the woman at the counter. Her hair was a little frizzy, and she had a tired look in her eyes. She didn't seem surprised to see me. I don't know why, but I felt like she knew exactly what I was going to say before I opened my mouth. I didn't mention anything about the strange building or the feeling of being watched. I didn't tell her about the whispers. Instead, I ordered a coffee and sat at the window, staring out into the street, feeling the weight of the night finally lifting. The last thing she said to me before I left was, "You're lucky. Most people who get lost around here don't make it out." I didn't ask what she meant, but as I stepped back into my car, the weight of her words lingered with me. Maybe I was lucky, or maybe I had just been part of a long pattern. Another lost soul who wandered too far off the beaten path. I didn't care to find out. The silence in the middle of nowhere was suffocating. I'd been driving for hours, the sun long set, the road ahead lit only by the faint beams from my headlights. My car hummed steadily, and the tires on the cracked asphalt made a constant sound. It was the only thing breaking the eerie quiet of the vast, empty countryside. Around me, nothing but fields stretched in every direction. No signs of life, no houses, no lights. Felt like I was the last person on Earth. I hadn't planned on being out here. The road I was on wasn't even on my map. I was just trying to get back home after visiting a friend, and somewhere along the way, I took a wrong turn, and here I was. There had been no towns, no exits, just miles of nothing. I wasn't scared. I mean, not exactly. I was a little unsettled, sure, but more out of frustration than fear. The thought of having to find a place to turn around and retrace my steps didn't sit well with me, but I kept going. The GPS on my phone was dead. No surprise there. I hadn't seen a signal for miles, and I didn't even know which direction I was going anymore. The radio was filled with static. No one was out here, no one at all. It wasn't like I hadn't been on back roads before, but this felt different, more isolating. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the task at hand. Just keep driving, just get out of this place. Then I saw the lights. They were small at first, just a faint flicker ahead, probably a house in the distance. I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe there was someone out here, someone to ask for directions. Maybe I could even stretch my legs and get a bit of a break from the monotonous drive. As I neared, the lights didn't get any brighter. They didn't seem like the kind of lights you would see coming from a house or a gas station. Instead, they were dim and odd, faint, yellowish glows that seemed to flicker and pulse unnaturally. I slowed the car down as I got closer, instinct telling me to be cautious. The road up ahead was no longer a smooth stretch of blacktop, but a rough, gravel path that looked like it had seen better days. The flickering lights were coming from some kind of shack or small building off the side of the road. There was no sign indicating it was a business or a home, just a decrepit structure, barely visible through the fog that had begun to roll in. The building itself was old, the wood dark and cracked, and I could barely make out the outline of what looked like an old pickup truck parked nearby. It didn't make sense, but I couldn't just keep driving without checking. So, I pulled off the road and parked by the edge of the gravel path, shutting off my engine. The hum of the car died down immediately, leaving the world even quieter. I could hear the distant rustling of the wind and, in the background, what I swore was the faintest sound of someone, moving inside the shack. I hesitated for a moment, sitting there in the car with my hand still on the door handle. I could leave. It was probably safer to just go, keep going until I found a real town. But curiosity gnawed at me. Something told me that if I didn't at least see what was going on, I might regret it later. So, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the building. As I moved closer, I could hear the creaking of the wooden structure and the sound of someone humming. A low, eerie tune that seemed to echo in the cold air. It was a man's voice, but it didn't sound human in the way I expected. It was like someone trying to remember how to hum, but failing miserably. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I pushed through. The door to the shack was ajar, just enough to let a sliver of light escape from the inside. I stopped just before the threshold and called out, "Hello!" My voice cracked in the stillness. No response, just the humming. I pushed the door open slightly more and peered inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was a mix of something rotting and a faint scent of metal, like old rusted tools. My stomach churned, and I stepped back, trying not to breathe too deeply. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. There was a man sitting at a small, rickety table in the center of the room. His back was to me, but I could see him clearly now. He was hunched over, his hands moving as if he was working on something, though I couldn't tell what. His clothes were torn and tattered, and his hair, long and greasy, hung down over his face. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't even move, but he kept humming that strange, off-key melody, louder now, like he didn't care I was standing there. I wasn't sure what to do. My instinct told me to leave, but I had to know what he was doing. Why was he here in the middle of nowhere in a shack like this? I stepped forward, and the floorboard creaked loudly under my foot. That's when he stopped humming. I froze. The silence that followed was worse than anything. The air felt thick, oppressive, like something was watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Slowly, the man turned his head toward me, but he didn't stand. He just looked over his shoulder with eyes that seemed too wide, too intense. For a moment, neither of us moved. It was like we were frozen in time. His gaze was unsettling, almost too calm for someone who looked like they hadn't seen another soul in years. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice flat, without emotion. I shook my head, feeling the tight knot in my throat. "I'm just lost. I need directions." The man didn't respond. Instead, he stood up slowly and walked toward a table cluttered with all sorts of strange, discarded objects. Old papers, empty cans, and what looked like broken electronics. He muttered something under his breath, though it didn't sound like words, just sounds. Then he stopped at the edge of the table, picked something up, and turned back to face me. It was a knife, a long, sharp-looking knife, and his hand gripped it too tightly, like he was about to do something with it. I immediately took a step back. My mind raced as I thought about what to do. Something was wrong here. This man wasn't right. The fear I'd been suppressing hit me all at once. I turned to leave, but the man stepped toward me, blocking the door. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice colder now. I didn't answer, couldn't. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized how much danger I was in. The door was the only way out, but it was blocked. The man kept staring at me, his eyes like two dark holes in his face. There was something about him, something off, like he wasn't quite human anymore. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it deep in my gut. I turned on my heel and ran for the window at the back of the shack, the glass rattling as I shoved it open. The cold night air hit me in the face, and I jumped out onto the ground, scrambling to my feet as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the sound of the man's boots hitting the floor, but I didn't stop. I ran as hard as I could, not daring to look back. It felt like forever before I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, finally managing to unlock the door. I jumped in, started the engine, and peeled out of there, my heart still racing. In the rearview mirror, I saw the shack disappear into the distance, swallowed up by the darkness. I didn't look back. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. Just me, my tent, and the quiet solace of the wilderness. I'd been working long hours in the city, and I felt like I needed this. Needed to breathe fresh air, hear the wind rustle through the trees, and remind myself that the world was more than gray office walls and the hum of fluorescent lights. The drive out was uneventful. I picked a spot in a remote area, far from the usual crowded campgrounds. It was near a small lake I'd visited once years ago. The dirt road leading to the site was overgrown, branches scraping the sides of my truck, but I didn't mind. The rougher the path, the less likely anyone else would be there. I wanted solitude. By the time I arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The lake was just as I remembered, calm, almost mirror-like, with tall pines framing its edges. I parked the truck, grabbed my gear, and set up camp about 20 yards from the shore. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. I set up my tent quickly, laying out my sleeping bag and organizing my supplies. After starting a small fire, I heated up a simple meal of canned chili and a piece of bread. The fire crackled softly, and I sat on a folding chair, staring out at the lake as the first stars began to appear. The only sounds were the occasional chirp of crickets and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. It was perfect. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped, and I wrapped myself in a jacket. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows around the camp. I felt a deep sense of peace. No notifications, no emails, no one needing anything from me. Just silence. I climbed into my tent around 10 p.m., zipping up the flap and settling into my sleeping bag. The stillness of the night was almost unnerving at first. In the city, there's always some background noise, cars, sirens, people talking. Out here, every little sound seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves in the wind, the occasional crack of a branch, the distant hoot of an owl. But I'd camped enough times before to know it was normal. The forest has its own rhythm. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I remember was waking up to a sound. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. A crunch, like someone stepping on dry leaves. My heart skipped a beat as I lay there, perfectly still, straining to hear. Another crunch. It was close, maybe 10 or 15 feet from the tent. I told myself it was probably an animal. A deer, maybe, or a raccoon. But something about it felt deliberate, like footsteps, slow, measured. My pulse quickened. I reached for the flashlight next to my sleeping bag, careful not to make noise. My fingers fumbled with the switch, and when I finally turned it on, the beam of light seemed blindingly bright in the small tent. The sound stopped. I waited, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. Just the wind and the faint rustle of leaves. I debated whether to look outside. Part of me wanted to unzip the tent and shine the flashlight around, to prove to myself there was nothing there. But another part of me, the part that felt the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, wanted to stay hidden. After a few minutes of silence, I convinced myself it was an animal and nothing more. I turned off the flashlight, laid back down, and tried to calm my racing heart. It took a while, but eventually, I fell asleep again. The next morning, I stepped out of the tent into the crisp air, the events of the night before feeling distant, almost dreamlike. But as I walked around the campsite, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Footprints, human footprints. They were faint but unmistakable, leading from the edge of the woods to within a few feet of my tent. Then they stopped. I stared at them for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone had wandered through the area, a hiker, lost or curious. But why would they come so close to my tent and then leave? And why hadn't they said anything? The thought made my skin crawl. I shook it off, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. People hike through these woods all the time. Maybe they hadn't even noticed the tent in the dark. I decided not to dwell on it. I had the whole day ahead of me and planned to make the most of it. After breakfast, I spent the morning exploring the area, hiking along the lake and into the surrounding woods. The forest was dense but beautiful, with sunlight filtering through the canopy and birds flitting from branch to branch. I felt a little better as the day went on, the unease of the morning fading into the background. By afternoon, I was back at the campsite, sitting by the water with a fishing rod. I didn't catch anything, but I didn't care. It was just nice to sit there, the sun warming my face, the water glinting like glass. For a while, I forgot about the footprints and the strange sounds from the night before. As the sun began to set, I cooked another simple meal over the fire. The light faded quickly, and soon the campsite was bathed in darkness again. I sat by the fire for a while, watching the flames dance, before retreating to the tent. Despite the previous night's events, I felt oddly at ease. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the day, or maybe I'd convinced myself there was nothing to worry about. But that night, I woke up again. This time, it was different. The sound wasn't just footsteps. It was a faint scraping noise, like something being dragged across the ground. It was slow, deliberate, and closer. My mouth went dry as I lay there, heart pounding in my chest. I reached for the flashlight again, my hands trembling. When I turned it on, the noise stopped immediately. The beam of light illuminated the inside of the tent, but outside, everything was still. My mind raced. Was someone out there? Were they messing with me? Or was I just imagining things? I stayed awake for what felt like hours, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, listening, but the sound didn't return. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I found more footprints. These were fresh, pressed into the soft dirt near the edge of the campsite. They weren't mine. They were larger, heavier, and this time they didn't just stop near the tent. They circled it. Panic set in. Someone was out here, someone who wasn't just passing through. My mind raced with possibilities. Were they watching me? Waiting for something? I packed up my gear in record time, shoving everything into the truck without bothering to organize it. I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. As I drove back down the dirt road, my eyes scanned the trees, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching me. But the forest was empty, silent. When I finally reached the main road, I felt a wave of relief so strong it was almost overwhelming. I didn't stop driving until I was back in the city. I never did figure out who or what was out there. Maybe it was just a hiker, someone who didn't realize how unsettling their presence was. Maybe it was nothing at all, just my imagination running wild in the isolation of the woods. But part of me doesn't believe that. Part of me thinks someone was out there watching, waiting, and that's a thought I can't shake. I haven't been camping since. I've always loved camping. Something about being out in the middle of nowhere with just the sound of nature around you makes the world feel a little simpler. That's what I was hoping for when I planned this trip. Simplicity. I didn't want to think about my inbox or my rent or the constant buzz of city life. Just a weekend in the woods, a tent, a sleeping bag, and my own thoughts. I picked a spot deep in the state forest, a place far enough from the beaten paths that I wouldn't run into many people. I'd done my research. The area was secluded but not too dangerous. The weather forecast looked clear, and there was even a small stream nearby for water. I packed everything meticulously. My lightweight tent, a sturdy knife, fire-starting gear, a compact first aid kit, enough food for 2 days, and a map and compass. No GPS. I wanted to do this the old-fashioned way. I drove out early Friday morning. The farther I got from the city, the less crowded the roads became. By the time I turned onto the dirt road leading to the forest, it felt like I was entering another world. I parked at a small gravel lot near the trailhead, shouldered my pack, and set off. The trail was faint but still visible, winding through dense trees that seemed to swallow the sunlight. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. Every now and then, I heard the chirping of birds or the rustle of something small moving through the underbrush. It took me about 4 hours to reach the spot I'd marked on my map. It was perfect. A clearing surrounded by tall trees, soft moss underfoot, and the gentle gurgle of the stream a short walk away. I set up my tent near the edge of the clearing and spent the rest of the afternoon gathering firewood and filtering water. By the time the sun started to set, I had a small fire crackling and a pot of instant noodles simmering on the flames. That first night was peaceful. The stars were out in full force, brighter than I'd ever seen them back home. I fell asleep easily, the sound of the stream lulling me into a deep, dreamless rest. The next morning, I woke up early, made some coffee, and decided to explore the area. I left most of my gear at the campsite, taking only my map, compass, knife, and a water bottle. The forest was alive with activity. Squirrels chattered in the trees, birds darted between branches, and the occasional deer bounded away when it spotted me. I followed the stream for a while, then cut through the woods to see if I could find any interesting landmarks. Around midday, I stumbled upon an old, overgrown trail. It wasn't on my map, but it looked like it had been used at some point, maybe by hunters or other campers. Curious, I decided to follow it. The trail led uphill, winding through thicker and darker patches of forest. The air seemed cooler here, and the trees were so dense that the sunlight barely reached the ground. After about an hour, I found myself at the edge of another clearing. This one was different from the one I'd camped in. For one, it wasn't natural. The ground was packed dirt, and in the center stood a crumbling stone structure. It looked like the remains of an old cabin or shelter, just a foundation and a few scattered stones left. Surrounding it were rusted metal tools, a broken axe, and what looked like the remnants of a fire pit. It was clear someone had lived here long ago. I spent some time poking around, trying to piece together the history of the place. Most of the tools were too rusted to make out their original purpose, but I found a few items that stood out. A metal tin, still intact, and a leather-bound notebook. The tin was empty, save for some dry, crumbled leaves. The notebook was fragile, the pages yellowed and brittle, but I could make out some of the writing. It was a journal written in neat, precise handwriting. The entries were short and dated, though the year wasn't legible. I only read a few entries, but they painted a grim picture. Whoever had written them was living alone, struggling to survive. They mentioned a harsh winter, dwindling food supplies, and the feeling of being watched. The last entry simply read, "I hear them at night, getting closer." A chill ran down my spine, but I told myself it was just my imagination. This was an old, forgotten place, and the journal's author was probably long gone. Still, I decided it was time to head back to my campsite. I slipped the notebook into my pack, thinking I'd take a closer look at it later, and started retracing my steps. The walk back felt different. The forest seemed quieter, the air heavier. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than I'd like to admit. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I stopped to listen, there was nothing but the rustle of leaves. I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a fox, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. By the time I reached my campsite, the sun was low in the sky. I quickly got a fire going and made dinner, trying to push the unease out of my mind. But as the darkness settled in, the feeling only grew stronger. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves seemed magnified. I kept turning my head, scanning the shadows for movement. At some point, I realized I was gripping my knife, my knuckles white. I forced myself to relax, to take deep breaths. "You're just spooking yourself," I muttered under my breath. "It's just the woods. Nothing's out there." But that night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in my tent, staring at the nylon ceiling, listening to every sound. At one point, I thought I heard something, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on a tree. It was distant, barely audible over the sound of the stream, but it was there. I sat up, straining to hear, but it stopped as suddenly as it had started. I told myself it was nothing and eventually drifted off, though my sleep was shallow and filled with uneasy dreams. The next morning, I decided to cut the trip short. The forest no longer felt welcoming, felt oppressive. I packed up my gear quickly, eager to get back to the trailhead and the safety of my car. As I was packing, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The notebook was gone. I was sure I'd left it in my pack, tucked safely in an inner pocket, but it wasn't there. I searched the entire campsite, even checked under my tent, but it was nowhere to be found. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were faint, barely more than impressions in the soft earth, but they were there. They weren't mine. They were too small and too narrow, and they led from the edge of the clearing to where my pack had been. My mouth went dry. Someone had been here in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. I didn't waste any more time. I shouldered my pack and started hiking back toward the trailhead as fast as I could without breaking into a run. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every now and then, I'd stop and listen, but the forest was silent. Too silent. Even the birds seemed to have gone quiet. When I finally reached my car, I practically threw my pack into the back seat and jumped in. I locked the doors, started the engine, and didn't look back until I was miles away, back on the main road. Only then did I let out a shaky breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I still think about that trip sometimes, about the old clearing and the notebook and the footprints. I don't know who or what was out there, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that I'll never camp alone again.